Out of all possible horror settings, one of the most terrifying has to be the deep ocean. And with how popular all things thalassophobia have become in recent years, I'm willing to bet most people will agree. For today's video, I've come across an almost unknown French analog horror project that deals exactly with that. It is the Erebus Report. The Erebus Report, or Rapport Erebus, was published fully between October and November 2023, and it clocks at 13 episodes. This makes me think that most of it, or the whole thing, was already made and ready before they even started publishing, which gets all of my respect. In it, we follow a crew of divers and scientists as they try to figure out why a big-ass hole has just appeared in the ground 200 meters below the ocean. As you can imagine, this will not be a simple task, and things soon get very spooky. If at any point in this video you enjoy what you see, please go and subscribe and leave some comments under their videos. Because by reading their own comments, it seems like they were hoping that somebody would cover their series and bring more attention to it. But sadly, it seems that they never had their big break. Who knows, if they see more interest, they might even work on something new. The first episode, Épave, which translates to wreck, starts with the date, 29th of March 1992. Now, thankfully, the series has English subtitles, so you can watch it by yourself, but they don't always translate all the text, so when needed, I'll be using my rusty French to fill in the gaps. We see that this is an exploration of a shipwreck near the Gambier Islands in French Polynesia, performed by a civilian using a remotely operated vehicle, or ROV. First of all, this already looks great. From the little particles swimming around to the way the flashlight gradually reveals parts of this wreck. But I want you to especially pay attention to the sound design, because that's probably my favorite aspect here. It doesn't take long for the ROV to come across something else. Yeah, absolutely not. But that's not even the worst part, as while it keeps exploring, we get a closer look at what that shadow was. As the ROV seemingly tries to surface, the thing from before knocks into it and it plunges back down, showing us once again only its shadow passing overhead. So immediately that's a big from me. But also, by just looking at this thing's shape, it's obviously meant to look like some sort of prehistoric water dino, like a pliosaurus, perhaps, although given its long tail it might be more similar to a mosasaurus. I'm just pretending to know what I'm talking about here. Anyway, the question is obviously, what the hell is it doing there? Episode 2, titled Fosse, or Trench in English, starts with the logo of the Institute of Ocean and Maritime Research. This time the date is the 26th of August 1995, so 2 whole years later. The coordinates tell us that we're once again in French Polynesia. We get more footage from a remote-controlled vehicle. This time it's the Pegasus, deployed by the research vessel Arion. The ROV is just exploring the ocean bed and things seem pretty normal, when it suddenly comes across a big hole. In the third episode, Orseus, we get more info on it. After the discovery of the hole, Mission Orseus has been launched, which, just like Pegasus and Arion, is a reference to Greek mythology. Analog horror creators really love their Greek myths, huh? The basic objective of the mission is to explore this big hole that has formed 200 meters below the ocean, hoping to analyze its geological characteristics and see the impact it has on the ecosystem. The team will have to be interdisciplinary, consisting of biologists, geologists, oceanographers, and underwater technology experts, using the latest diving equipment available. The hole has been called Erebus, aka the Greek personification of darkness, hence the name of the series, and has a diameter of 60 meters while its depth is yet unknown. It has been found in an atoll, which as I learn now is a ring-shaped coral reef or island that encircles a body of water, which is itself called a lagoon. This atoll is located in the Tuamotu archipelago. We also get some info on the research vessel Arion. This basically states that it's a big and modern boat with laboratories and anything else the crew might need. Seeing as the topography of Erebus is unknown, they don't want to risk a remote-controlled vehicle, so the crew has come up with a different plan. They will build this big 4-legged structure over the hole that will allow the members of the team to be lower than a diving cage. When they're down there, 2 members of the crew will leave the diving bell to explore, while the third will stay back to give them directions. Now, most of this is not really exciting information. This whole section was basically made for realism's sake, and that's even what the creator says in the comments. All of this is mostly for setting a mood, which, with that ethereal soundtrack, it totally does. I like this kind of dedication. All of this text can be read and it details the technical side of the mission, but it's not really needed to understand what's happening. But they still decided to add it for immersion. Get it? Immersion? We also see our crew. Adrien, a marine geologist, François, an oceanography researcher, and Capucine. This is the first time I learned that there are people called Capucine out there. You know, like the coffee, like the monkeys, like the monks. Anyway, she is an expert in saturation diving. We finish off with a cool little scheme of the mission. Immediately the next episode is called Incident. Poor guys didn't even get a foot in the door, huh? The date is the 3rd of November 1995. Capucine is communicating with the vessel, updating them on the mission progress. They've reached 160 meters of depth and are making the last checks. They start going down in the cage and enter Erebus. I think that what's happening is that Capucine and François stayed in the bell while Adrien is in the cage. I'm not sure if I got that correctly. As they get lower and lower, François starts hearing a sound. And of course, some shit goes down. Something knocks the diving bell over and Adrien's cord goes slack. It's been severed. So he is basically lost and alone down there. As the bell starts to flood, we see a familiar shadow cross the screen. I gotta say that once again, that damn sound design. It's so atmospheric and terrifying, both in the sounds of the water, but also of their equipment. And I'm not even mentioning the voice acting, which is very believable, even though it is very distorted by the radio. For a moment, I generally forgot that I was watching an analog horror episode. The following one is from the next day, and it's an incident report. After communication with the team was lost, an ROV has been deployed. We get both a look at what it found and, unfortunately, at the autopsy reports of our crew. We see the bell at first, then the report of Capucine, who suffered head trauma and died of pulmonary edema, or basically she drowned. Then we see something censored, probably a body. Then we get the report on François, who, as you can see, was even less lucky. As his whole right leg is missing, he had broken ribs, a ruptured spleen, and lesions on his shoulder. We then see the broken diving cage with something tangled in it. And finally, all that's left of Adrien is his right arm. We see that the footage from the divers is being transferred at the moment, and we end on a picture of the crew. The absence of any soundtrack here makes this a pretty somber moment, even though we knew the crew for only like a minute. I'll talk more about this at the end, but I wish this type of horror project would go harder on the characters' side of things. It would make already horrifying moments like this much more impactful. Imagine if we actually cared about any of these people, and then we just saw these awful autopsy reports on them. Also, I'm pretty sure this picture is AI, and I've seen a bunch of analog horror projects using it this way with stuff like "this person doesn't exist" and such, to create pictures of fake people, which, out of all uses of generative AI, it might actually be the most acceptable one for me, because it would be weird to use actual photos of real people, so I'll give this one a pass. The next upload finally gives us the first-person footage from the diving suit. We see Adrien in the cage. They slowly begin lowering him. When he gets deep enough, they lose radio contact. Adrien starts describing what he sees, like the fact that the tunnel isn't getting narrower, the walls seem to be made of basalt, etc. Suddenly there is a tug on the cord. And soon after, the cage stops. And soon after that, we see this. This is so cool. I mean, look at this in slow motion. It's horrifying. But the best part for me is how Adrien just shuts up. He doesn't scream or say anything. He knows he's basically fucked. We just hear him start to breathe faster and look around frantically in a silent panic. I guess now we also know why only an arm was found. The next episode is basically just a description and drawing of our big fishy friend, who has been called a Prognathodon Kerberos. Which, two things here. Now we know what dinosaur it was actually inspired by, the Prognathodon. But why Kerberos? Well, as you can probably tell, it seems to be a reference to Cerberus, the mythological Greek three-headed hound that guarded the entrance to Hades, the underworld. So it seems like a very on-the-nose reference to the fact that our toothy friend is also guarding the entrance to the underworld. Anyway, things pretty damn horrifying. Also, I really hope that this one is not AI. That would be very annoying. Seeing as it's from 2023, there is a chance that it isn't, but I don't know. I couldn't find any image matches. I really hope that they just lifted the design from somewhere. It is terrible being at the point where you can't even enjoy something like this normally without having that question in your mind popping up once or twice. Anyway, the next one is Belize, aka Beacon, because the scientists have finally grown tired of this fishy business and decided to contact the Navy. As is often the case, those guys want a slice of the pie. They give them military equipment for the exploration of Erebus and also a helicopter to harpoon the darn fish with a tracker. The placement of this tracker happens on the 11th of November. In the next upload, Cav, we immediately see that the French Navy has taken over. So, the military is planning a bathymetric survey of Tartaros, and not Erebus as the subtitles for some reason suggest. The idea here is that a big cavern has been found at the other side of the Erebus hole, and they want to know more about it. Also, if it wasn't already on the nose enough before, Tartaros is basically the deepest part of the Greek underworld. We get more info that's not really important, but once again adds to the mood. They even completely gave up with the subtitles at this point, writing only technical details, which I found really funny. To lower the scanner, they'll be reusing the same structure from the last mission. And so that's what we see. The scanner keeps getting lower and lower until it comes to the open area of Tartaros. And here, well, take a look. We see giant monoliths all around with writing on them. The episode finishes by showing us the sonar mapping of the area, and I'm assuming that the red spots are the monoliths themselves, so you see that there's a ton of them. This place is huge, and I love how immediately things have gone from spooky megalodon eats people to ancient underwater city and possible cosmic horrors incoming. And once again, I gotta give it to the creators, because the choice of using just this intermittent red light as the only source of illumination is genius. It just gives you small glimpses into this enormous room and you feel like something could suddenly appear at any moment. The following upload is Orpheus, once again in reference to a Greek myth. This time it's the great poet/musician who descended into the underworld to bring back his wife, Eurydice. His story ends tragically, as while he's bringing Eurydice back, he breaks the one condition that Hades and Persephone gave him, to not turn around. He does so and Eurydice is sucked back into the underworld. Afterwards, there are different versions of Orpheus's fate, but they're usually pretty dark and tragic. So the name doesn't really bode well, does it? This episode describes the new manned mission to go and explore Tartarus. It shows us the submarine they'll be using and their special diving suits. Once again, all of this info is not really important, it just adds to the world building. We also learn the names of the new crew members. Stéphane Bigot, which having basically Bigot as a family name is pretty tragic, not gonna lie, Benjamin Gauthier, and Pascal Lemur. Then we finally get to the big enchilada, the one where shit finally really hits the fan. This one is titled Katabasis, which is Greek for descent into hell. The mission takes place on the 7th of January 1996. So once again we get first-person footage from our crew. They leave their submarine and step into the unknown, with the monoliths towering all around them. The writing itself doesn't look like any known ancient writing to me, but also I don't know these things by heart, so if there's any linguists here specializing in ancient writing, please do stand up. I'm going to assume that it's made up. Our boys keep exploring and we get more and more the sense of scale of this place. They say that there's some sort of anomaly to the northwest. Stefan goes to investigate and they find what looks like stairs, so long that their light beams don't even reach the other side. At the end, they find a new type of room, which looks almost circular in construction and has a bridge in the middle. They say that the particles around them look organic, and so they want to take a sample, while Stefan checks the bridge, and I'll just let it play out. And so this time around, we do get some screaming. So there's a bunch of things to comment on here. First of all, the reveal of this wall being a set of doors with the giant black hand coming out to grasp it and the two pinprick eyes illuminating from the dark, just chef's kiss. Unfortunately, I do think that this is a moment in which they could have done a bit more with the audio effects. While it's strangely silent except that first growl, that combined with just how quick the movements are negatively impacts the sense of weight and scale in my opinion. And when we later see the creature running after our protagonist, it admittedly looks a bit silly if you focus on it, but this is more evident on subsequent rewatches, while the first time I was completely on board. The second to last episode is titled Soutos, another reference to a mythological Greek king, but also to something real that I'll explain in a moment. Here we see a rather official-looking document with a lot of redactions, and I love how it's directed to Monsieur le Président, as in Mr. the President. Is that actually how these things are written? Wasn't it enough to just say Monsieur Président? What do I know, my French is pas très bon, mec. Basically, the document describes the situation we're in. It describes the mission and the absolute gravity of what has been uncovered by the French Navy. They confirm the existence of the danger that it poses cannot be ignored. For the good of the French Republic and the world, the French Navy requires the authorization to take action. Any information pertaining to the action is to be strictly classified, and the less people know about it, the better. And so, Le Président authorizes the so-called nuclear test, and they even drop the actual name of the president at the time, Jacques Chirac. I guess that's why there's a disclaimer in the comments saying that this is a work of fiction and any references to real people are fictional too. Nice save. Oh, and also because this date, the 27th of January 1996, was the actual date of France's last nuclear test, which was actually called Soutos, and it was in fact performed in an atoll in French Polynesia. I love when real-world events are used to justify insane shit in analog horror. It's just a cool detail that makes everything feel a bit more grounded. And so we witnessed this test. And yeah, the sea goes kaboom indeed. And I gotta agree with the user that left a pretty foreboding comment. All they did is make the Erebus larger, large enough for the entity to leave. That's cold, Mr. Crunch 4340. That's cold. And the creator liked this comment, so it might be true. At the end, we only have the epilogue episode, and I was a bit confused the first time around, but now it all makes sense. It's just a spectrogram of a sound. And many of you fans of internet spooky slop like me already understand what this is. It's the infamous bloop, a mysterious ultra-low frequency sound recorded in 1997 and never heard since. A lot of people speculated, especially probably after they realized it's more marketable, that it might have come from some huge deep-sea creature. Ooh, I'm shaking in my diving booties. But the bloop was probably produced by an underwater icequake or some other shenanigans happening on the shifting seabed, so stop asking questions. Anyway, putting the dates together, the bloop being recorded basically a year after the nuclear test, and the creator liking the comment about the entity escaping from Tartaros, it's safe to assume that the implication here is that whatever this thing was, it's still roaming around the ocean and is responsible for the bloop. And so we can put a neat bow on the whole thing. Now, I got a few thoughts. First of all, kudos to the creators for making this project from beginning to end. As you know, that's something that I always commend here. Apparently they've worked on it for months in the evenings after work. It must have been a big hassle, but I think you'll agree with me that the result was worth it. After Rapport Erebus was over, they said they were gonna take a big break, and that they hoped that someday the series would get some recognition on the platform. Unfortunately, as you can see, with the exception of Catabasis, the series has not made a big splash yet. Get it? From their words, it's apparent that they still got some ideas for more stuff, but I also understand that after you put in so much work and doesn't get the recognition you hoped for, you might lose your will to keep going. So I'd really be grateful to all of you if you showed them some love. Go subscribe to their channel, play their videos, leave a like and a comment and all of that. So I wanted to cover this one for a few different reasons. First of all, I found it to be generally very well made. I already commented on how great the sound design was and how it really helped to create the right atmosphere for the project. But on top of that, we got another one of those cases where a person managed to make something with actually mostly believable visuals, even though they were obviously on a budget. I think that the approach here was obviously smart. They don't show everything and rely on the use of different types of lighting to sell the scenes, be it through the use of flashlights, the blinking red light from the scanner, or even the choice to show the shadow of the big dino instead of always showing the whole thing up close. So when that actually happens, I think it's much more effective. The grittiness of the footage itself and the addition of all those particles also obviously helps. Though I will criticize the choice of the VHS overlay, because in my opinion they went with one of the ugliest and most annoying ones. I can't stand all of these white lines flashing around constantly. I absolutely get that not everyone has the access to the tools needed for a genuine VHS effect, but even if you end up using a simple overlay, I think there's better options out there, which I myself use at times. Do tell me if you find mine annoying too, though. The escalation of the whole thing is also handled in a very cool way, in my opinion. At first you think that it's gonna be about a big dino fish, but the more they discover and the more you realize that there's something much bigger going on here. While, as I already said, the final reveal of the big monster was a bit quick in its execution, it's still effective enough. Although I would have probably left it at the hand opening the door, instead of having the character be followed by it. It did look just a little bit goofy. I also mentioned how I love the tie-in to the real-world events, which helps to make everything feel more grounded, and when you realize what's going on, it gives you those moments. I feel that the use of the documents and especially the autopsy reports also added a lot to the mood, as the creators themselves said. So all in all, this one gets my seal of approval and I hope to see more in the future. But I also do have some small criticisms. Just a couple of things that personally took me out of it. The main one being the pacing. Now, from the one side, I think it's cool that the project is pretty quick, has basically zero fat and gets right into it. I think a lot of people will appreciate that. But personally, I would have liked to see more build-up. I would have loved especially more character building. As I've said with other videos, more of these projects should focus on characters in my opinion, because that's the best way to create real stakes for all the action. I really didn't care for any of these people, except maybe Capucine, just because I found her name funny. And this is especially true, methinks, when it comes to things like cosmic horror. It's much better to see the effects of the horror on the characters. The more you care about them, the more the consequences of these horrors and their sheer size is felt by the viewer/reader. Sure, even if you think of classic stuff that deals with cosmic horror like Lovecraft or Junji Ito, it's not like they have any really memorable characters, but still, the perspective is always human, and while not interesting, the characters always feel like average people who are now exposed to something much larger than them. That's what gives it much more gravity, in my opinion. Sure, this would mean much more work, but I think it's all worth it if you want the viewer to have any reaction to the characters being horribly disposed of, instead of just an "oh, that's bad, rip character who I don't care about, lmao." Also, not every horror project needs to be as slow as something like Oakburn Opus. And just as an aside, I wanted to make a video on Oakburn Opus since I found it a year ago or something, but when I started writing my script, fucking Nexpo out of all people made this video. So then I waited, and more recently, seeing as there was also a third episode I could talk about, I started writing again. And guess what? Fucking Wendigo made a video about it. Just my luck. So yeah, I'll never do it at this point, but do go and check out that one too. Anyway, something like Oakburn Opus is extremely slow, but people seem to love that about it. In my opinion, it's a bit on the other extreme, as in it's a bit too slow and relies a bit heavily on its stylistic choices. But I think that the ideal would be something more or less in the middle. If Erebus had some slower character moments or some underwater explorations that didn't lead to any immediate threat, I feel like the pacing would have been better. While like this, it does feel very bite-sized. But that's just me, do share your opinion in the comments. And another thing I wanted to go over is the obvious connections between Erebus and the many viral underwater horror videos that have become so popular in the last few years. You know, the ones I'm talking about, those random 3D animations where some dude is just in the middle of the ocean for some reason and a giant face or something appears from the depths. You know, the kind of shit that 10-year-olds think that goes super hard. And I mean, that's not like a criticism towards them. I know my little bro used to watch them, and if I was his age, I'd probably love them too. It's cool to have some horror for the little guys, no? But they are mostly simple cheap scares that rely on the recent virality of all things thalassophobia. Like, oh my god, look, it's the blue versus fucking, I don't know, megalodon or some shit, that's crazy, yo. So at least for me, the comparison is always inescapable when looking at any YouTube horror set underwater. So, does Erebus avoid this form of spooky slop? I think mostly yes. In fact, only 2 moments kind of felt like they could come from one of those videos, specifically the first appearance of the dinofish that gets in the ROV's face, and the Cthulhu thing following the character at the end. This, to me, goes to show that what this project does best is mainly rely on the inherent terrifying nature of the ocean itself. Just seeing these characters dive into the depths and all that darkness and hearing the sounds of metal shifting under all that pressure, or just the sounds of the water itself, is already chilling enough. The natural camera movements also kinda help to sell it, which I wonder if they used a VR headset or maybe connected their phones to use as cameras. Having this as a base for the horror also makes some of the more supernatural elements hit a lot better. I genuinely love the second time we see the dinofish up close and the hand out of the door, and they work thanks to the build-up. So yeah, it's not an easy thing to do, but they managed to sell me on it. One final thing I will add is that I sometimes might overlook some of the more metaphorical elements of the projects I cover, or kinda gloss over their deeper meanings, so it is something I plan on getting right going forward. But in this case, to me it seems like it mostly boils down to the usual curiosity killed the cat kind of situation. Mankind's will to discover things while nature itself is basically telling us to fuck off leads to biting off more than we could chew. And trying to solve the problem by destructive and violent means might make it even worse, and release a Lovecraftian god into the ocean. You know, as these things usually go. And listen, it's not like art or horror specifically needs to have some deep original meaning. Sometimes the important thing is just the atmosphere and the spooky ideas, and that's fine. But I do think that adding at least a bit of metaphorical depth to your story can go a long way to get people to obsess over your work. And that's something you'll generally see in all the biggest horror creators on the platform, so don't listen to me, but listen to them. With all of that said, once again, check out this cool-ass project. Tell them Mulder sent you, and I'll probably see you soon. But for now, goodbye and see you, Space Krakens.